Bad Boys Ride or Die. So this is the fourth movie in the Bad Boys franchise. The IMDb plot summary: this summer, the world's favorite bad boys are back with their iconic mix of edge of your seat action and outrageous comedy, but this time with a twist. Miami's finest are now on the run. Sounds like it's written by their marketing team. This is directed by Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah, starring Will Smith, Martin Lawrence, Vanessa Hudgens, and some cameos from Joe Pantoliano. Yeah, this is the fourth movie in the Bad Boys franchise. We covered the first Bad Boys on our travel episode. I'll just kind of briefly say I'm a huge fan of the first Bad Boys, a very important movie to me, formative in my love of movies. Bad Boys 2, I also think is great, though very, very different, a lot more action than comedy. The first one I think had a good mix of the two. Second one was a lot more action and very interesting. Just if you look back in a time capsule of sort of like the attitudes of post 9/11 America, I think that movie is the evil demonic id that was unleashed by 9/11 and the Bush administration. It sort of encapsulates all the evilness that came out of America at that time. Just a fascinating film. And then the third movie came out about 3 years ago, right before the pandemic, that I thought was enjoyable, good, like nice to see Will and Martin back. But this movie I thought was, I'll just quickly say I loved it. I thought it was a
Oh,
great return to form for both. I mean, Martin Lawrence is just fantastic, and this kind of steals the movie from Will in a way. And I liked high level how this brought back more of the comedic elements of the Bad Boys franchise. Like I said, the second one I think was a lot more action than comedy. The third one was good, but just some of the comedy wasn't really landing. And this movie I just found like incredibly entertaining, exactly what I want out of a summer blockbuster. You know, my feelings on Will Smith, I mean, maybe it was because I was preparing for this episode and all of a sudden got Will pilled again and was like listening to Big Willie style for 2 weeks straight. But I thought I had no issues with him in this whatsoever in terms of the post slap stuff. And yeah, I thought it was really, really entertaining. But I'll get in more of my thoughts in a bit. I'm curious on what you thought of the film and maybe what you seen the other. I know you saw Bad Boys 1 because
yeah.
we covered it. Had you seen any of the other Bad Boys films?
That's the only one I've seen. Maybe I should see some of the other ones, although after watching this movie, maybe not.
Oh no, you didn't
Uh,
you didn't like Bad Boys 4, huh?
I was not a fan of this movie. It's hard to say because I get it. Like if you're a fan of the franchise, you've been following it, you have a relationship with these guys, you have a relationship with the style and the tone of this movie, of course it's gonna work. I don't have any of those, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of walking in almost like a fresh, from the road person watching this movie. And it's hard to have that sense of humor land where, you know, guns are being fired and all you care about is Skittles and what have you. I mean, it's very goofy and
Yeah.
silly. So there's that, which I guess is too broad for me.
Mm.
And I watched it in the theater, and I was hoping that okay, maybe other people around me would be laughing and having a good time. So maybe that'll rub off on me because this is definitely it can be a crowd pleaser kind
Oh,
of movie.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
nobody was laughing. So it was like crickets in
Interesting.
my theater.
Oh.
So, it just was not like a fun experience in that sense because not everything has to be serious and important or what have you, of course not, but you at least want to have a collective fun time, and it wasn't. The other thing that I felt was, I don't know if you felt this, but at least in my theater the movie looks pretty bad. Like it feels like a TV movie to me. Like this feels like it felt like an episode of an NBC network show, not even a
Mm.
TV movie. Like I don't know, Chicago PD and one of those TV shows, even they look better in my mind. Like it just looked kind of cheap, with all the action sequences and how the camera is positioned in that whole like helicopter scene. And it's like this is just not well done. But again, I just don't know. Maybe they are going for like, B tier, D tier sort of action and fun, and maybe that's supposed to be funny, and maybe that's the point. I don't know, but to me, it just didn't look very good.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually loved the look of this movie. It reminded me so much, and these two directors that did the last Bad Boys as well, the third one,
Hmm.
it to me, it's like the modern version of what Michael Bay's style was. And he created that style, honing it on the first Bad Boys. And the second Bad Boys, he really crystallized and he changed cinema, I think. I really do think he changed blockbuster cinema with his style. And then, he sort of got stuck in this Transformers land for a while. And then the action movies moved away kind of from the Bay style to something that I just find a lot more flat and boring in the last 10 years. Not really interesting kinetic camera work, interesting angles, interesting camera movements. And I think these guys, especially in this movie, and more so the last one, really brought back that like fun Michael Bay, interesting kinetic style to action movies. I loved the drone stuff that they were doing in the final battle sequence in that alligator old theme park, where the drones are kind of like flying through, and you could see all the different action and how
That
it was
was good.
being worked. That reminded me a lot of this amazing shot in Bad Boys 2. There, Will Smith is on the other side of a wall of one of the bad guys. They're having this shootout, and the camera's turning around between, like, flowing one side of the wall, then to the other side of the wall. And it's a 360 rotating shot that I remember sitting in the theater at the time, and like, that's really amazing. Like, how are they doing this? And in this movie, I knew how they were doing it with drones, but I thought that was really cool. The POV stuff at the end too, this camera rig that Will's wearing, where you can kind of see this first person point of view, making it look kind of like a video game. You might think that was all CG, but it was this practical camera rig that they rigged up to him, and they could flip it around so you could see his face, and they flip it around, you could see the point of view of his camera. I was like really impressed with actually how these two directors are like kind of picking up on this Michael Bay style that I kind of want to come back a little bit. I do feel like action movies nowadays aren't as interesting looking, and there isn't like
Mhm.
this new fresh voice in action cinema in the last like 10 years. So I'm hoping maybe these guys can do that with this film. But yeah, I don't know, the humor for me, the Martin Lawrence stuff, each of these movies, like, his character has some new obsession. And the second one, he's getting into like therapy and things. And the third movie's a
Mhm.
lot about growing older and aging. And I love this one where he's have this revelation of his past lives. And that whole scene with, we're talking about, Will Smith was like his donkey in the past life. I mean, that stuff was just, I thought, incredibly funny. I loved all those bits with trying to get the Skittles.
Crickets.
Oh, really? My theater was dying. And I cannot, okay, so I will say this too, and then we'll get into Will. I thought the moment with the Reggie character, who has one of the funniest scenes in Bad Boys 2, is when Reggie character was a guy who was dating Martin Lawrence's daughter. In one scene where Martin Lawrence and Will Smith are like kind of ribbing on him because he's trying to take his
Oh
teenage
yeah.
daughter out. So they're trying to intimidate him. If you find the clip on YouTube, it's one of the funniest things in any of these movies. But the fact that they brought this guy back and had this incredible action scene with him. I mean, maybe this is like spoilers, but that moment at the end of that scene, my whole theater was erupting. I was clapping. I'm like, this is why we come to the movies and see them in a theater. Like, that
Mm.
moment we can all be like, oh my God, freaking Reggie, like, bringing it down. And like, seriously, like, one of the best moments of like the audience sort of be like, oh shit, he's doing this. And then when he does that, again, spoilers, but like that salute at the end is one of the coolest things I've seen in a movie, in terms of like the audience just sort of like being up on their feet. And the ending with him too was cool too. But I'm surprised, like, in your theater, no one reacted to that.
I guess people had not watched the previous movies,
Yeah.
probably. I don't know. But see, that's the thing. Like, when you have a relationship with the movie like
Yeah,
that, then
yeah.
of course that'll land on you totally differently. I thought those scenes were fun, but I had no idea that this is a returning character in the movie.
Yeah, okay. I was hoping it would still work if you didn't know that, but I guess at least in your theater that wasn't really the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then getting to Will, I mean, I had no feelings one way or the other in terms of, it felt like the Oscar slap never happened, honestly, like when I was watching this. And in these movies, he's always played more of the straight man to Martin Lawrence. I mean, Martin Lawrence was a stand-up comedian before he became
Hmm.
a movie star, and he had a big sitcom as well. But Will was always a little bit more of like the foil to his comedy. So I think in this movie, it's not like the jokes were necessarily on Will's shoulder; it was on Martin. And I loved how they dialed up more Martin Lawrence in this. He's a comedian too. I've always really loved his movies, honestly. I love going to Big Mama's house. I was loving to see him back, because he also sort of been out of it for a while. But yeah, I
Hmm.
thought Will did a great job with the physicality. I mean, he's very old now, but he's still, yeah, he's not running around with his shirt off like that famous sequence from the first Bad Boys. But I still am buying that he can do all of this.
First of all, just from a look standpoint, I just think he looks not great. Like, he looks kind of orange, and this goatee and this whole look is just, I'm not a fan of this look, and he looks pretty old, which is fine. But I think it's when you're when you look old, but when you're pretending to not be old, that always lands on me. Is very noticeable. So to me, that was something that I felt. But then the other thing that I kept thinking of, and I remember feeling this way in the King Richard leading up to the Oscars and the Slap Press tour, where
Mhm.
he would show up and have very heartfelt messages about Serena and Venus and the family and his co-stars and everything about the movie. But I always felt when he was talking, something was off. Like, something was slow, between like the mouth and the head and the heart. And I really felt that in this movie. I think that something is off with him, like in general. And that sort of came through. And I remember I only seen the first Bad Boys movies as we talked. And of course, this is like Charm Machine, super cool, slick, Will Smith. And it to me, this felt like again, Will Smith basically playing Will Smith now,
Hmm.
as opposed to Will Smith, the character in this movie. Because to me, those two people seem so different, which I guess he's older. So you could say that, okay, maybe he's matured up or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, something about the slowness and that sort of rubbed kind of the wrong way with me, because the guy in the first movie is like so slick and stylish,
Hmm.
and this one isn't. And I just kept thinking of the King Richard press tour.
Interesting. Both Martin and Will are close to 60 now, and they are not the young, spry guys that they
No.
were in Bad Boys 1 for sure. So yes, I do agree that he looks a little older, like his face, you can tell he's got some work done, and he moves a little bit slower than he did on Bad Boys 1. And yes, he's not running around with his shirt off. But I actually think that over the course of these films, and I rewatched all three or two, Bad Boys 2 and 3 before seeing this one, just to kind of put myself back in the mood in it. I like how these characters have been aging over time. And in the last movie, actually, the third Bad Boys, a big theme of that is getting older. And there's this whole joke in the movie about how Will Smith's dyeing his goatee because he's embarrassed to get old, which is why
Mm.
in this movie it looks so obviously dyed. I think it's like, well, now we know he's dyeing it. And that's part of the joke in the last movie, that he's trying to kind of stay young. But I like how the characters are now dealing with things that they would be in their, I mean, I guess I don't know if they're supposed to be in their 50s in this movie, maybe like
Oh
40s. Maybe
yeah.
they're playing a little bit, or I don't know. Maybe cops could still be that old and kind of doing this stuff. But I like how they deal with how these characters are growing older. It's not just about being like the flashy young bachelors in the first Bad Boys. Now he's getting married. Now he has these panic attacks because
To a
he's
20-year-old, I might add. That woman that he marries is like really young or looks really young.
she looks young. Yeah,
Yeah,
she looks young. Hey, it's Mike Lowry. That's I'm surprised he was even getting married. I was like, oh my God, Mike Lowry's
that's
getting
true.
married. But I do like how he's dealing with these different things now you would at what would at this age. Like I think these panic attacks he's having in this film, which is a plot line that actually I didn't think resolved very well or at all. But to me, I view that as okay. Well, now like there's people that care about me, and I don't know if I can be the crazy quote unquote bad boy that I used to be as a cop and endangering my life and doing all these things, because there's now a wife at home who's going to be that I have to care about, but also who cares about me. So I think he actually played this well, for me at least. Of he's aged his character up in a way that I felt was realistic in terms of what Mike Lowry might be dealing with like 30 years later. And
Mm.
I think if he was trying to be the same, bachelor ladies
No,
man
he
Mike
shouldn't be
Lowry,
that. No,
it would not have
no.
worked. So I don't know. I kind of liked how this franchise they're bringing in the age of the characters and the different things they're dealing with in their lives over the course of the 30 years and the four films. Even with Martin's character, too, I think they're giving him some additional things to think about. In the last movie, he
Yeah.
became a grandfather. It was also about him needing glasses in the last movie. So I don't know. I agree with you, but I think for me, as a fan of the franchise, that it worked that they're weaving these sort of themes of being
No, the plot
old
lines are
into it.
there of growing older, or the beats are there. I think it's the performance, and I'm not expecting him to run around. It just doesn't feel earned and lived in. To me, it felt like this is somebody who's trying to be young and have energy, but sort of not able to get there. But that's not actually in the script. Like he's not doing this as like a method thing because the character demands it. It's more like, oh no, I want to be energetic and what have you, but it's just not getting there. And I'm not even talking
Mm,
physically, I'm talking more mentally
mm.
of his presence of mind and such. Like all the things you said, they're on paper, but I don't get any of that from his performance.
Yeah, it landed on me. I thought I'm like, he's found his niche of how he can do the old 90s Will Smith again, but not feel like he's
Mm,
a 60-year-old playing a 23-year-old or something. Because he can't,
mm,
like, a part of his appeal in those 90s box office movies, I think too, is like his youth and vigor
yeah.
and energy. He comes across as like a kid in like a good way. In all of his films, he plays sort of like this youthful character, this youthful
Yeah.
energy, and he obviously can't do that at his age. I mean, I'm sure some actors do try, to still pretend like they can pull that off. But I don't know.
Right.
I was pleasantly surprised actually with how he was able to age up the quote unquote Will Smith persona into a movie that again, completely worked for me.
God, well,
I
bad.
oh my God, I've not been a bigger fan of Will Smith, I think, in my life than the last 2 weeks. Like I am full hard in this episode unlocked all these innate Will Smith feelings inside of me that I'm like, yeah, I've been listening to Big Willie style for two
This is
weeks.
hilarious. I mean, meanwhile, I was like, oh, I'm so bored with this movie, and
Yeah, maybe you needed you should play the music. Maybe that was the
that'll
key for
help.
me, unlocking all these musical memories, which is again a big part of his persona for me.
I think it's tricky also, right? Like we did a Woody Allen episode, hell. So,
Hmm.
uh, we are both very much about you can separate the art from the artist. But I think
Hmm.
with movie stars, it's difficult because who they are is what they're bringing every single time. And you go to see them for who they are. And
Hmm.
I think it's tricky, not because what he did, but to me, more of like what led to that act and what we were talking about earlier about
Mm.
being a movie star and having this complicated life and whatever bottled up emotions, anger, rage, all of that. I see that in his performance, and I just don't know if that's the arc of the character. Maybe I need to watch all the movies to buy that. But I think that's sort of what I was rubbing up against, that you're in a different movie, maybe. It's just so hard to separate that. Now, what would be great is, and we'll get to that, a movie on my list where that whole complicated mess that is in his real life is what the character demands, and it works pretty amazing.
Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.